So now, our keynote speaker today is Pat Furlong. She's the founding president of Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy. In 1984, when both of her sons were diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy, Pat did what so many moms in this room do. She refused to accept the status quo. She turned personal heartbreak into a global mission to speed up research, transform care, and fight for treatments. Her dedication turned PPMD into an international powerhouse. While Pat serves on prominent national boards like NORD and speaks across the globe, she remains a fierce champion for families, reminding us all that patients are the true catalyst for progress. Pat, we are deeply grateful to have your wisdom, your fire, and your heart. And everyone, please welcome Pat Furlong.
First of all, thank you for having me. I love the Ryanisms. I think teamwork is the dream work, and I think that is what holds us together. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about PPMD. You'll maybe be surprised and maybe a little bit think that I'm the craziest person in the world. And my friend Rhonda Bartek's in the back, and I think that he knows that about me. So with that, I'll begin. So I have a disclaimer because you always have disclaimers of people and what they do. And I think in this disclaimer, I can say to you that I'm the mom of two, and I realize I called my daughters lovely without calling my sons lovely in this one. I have 4 lovely children. Unfortunately, my 2 boys are not here anymore. I have always believed that children deserve to reach their dreams. All of them, whatever they are. And so I'm passionate about that. And my stock portfolio just includes hope and the persistence that all kids deserve more and more and more. So this is a little girl, me. I'm 6 years old and I have 2 secrets. The first secret is that hairdo. I'm not going to disclose how that happens because that's really private, and I know all of you would die to have that hairdo, but that's the first secret. The second secret is I'm a carrier of Duchenne muscular dystrophy. I didn't know that. No one knew it then. And so this is a female carrier. 30% of the time that this gene gets knocked out, you see a female carrier. And so you live your life not suspecting anything. And then there's a day, whoops, Chris knew I was going to do that. So in June of 1984, I got a diagnosis. But before that, we were 4 children. My husband is a physician. I have a master's degree in nursing. I took care of adults. I was in whole organ transplant, renal dialysis, and cardiac care because children didn't get sick, in my view, because I couldn't bear it. So these are my 4 children. My 2 daughters, as you can see, are princesses. My little boy, Chris, is a vampire, and I had a reluctant toddler. When those boys turned 4 and 6 years old, they were diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It was a sunny day in June 1984, many, many years ago, and this is what I learned. This is an X-linked pediatric disease. 1 in 4,600 children primarily male, will be diagnosed with Duchenne. It's one of the largest genes in the human genome. It affects every system of the body. It's called a single gene disorder. So I said to myself, well, how hard could it be to fix this? I mean, really, how hard could it be? Turns out pretty hard. So in my first thought, because the research talked about myoblast transfer, and the concept of myoblast transfer was myoblasts are immature muscle cells, and the idea would be that you transplant them, right? You put those immature myoblast cells into cells that are degenerating in muscle, and then that would fix it for sure. Well, think about that. One of the problems is that they don't go into muscle. You can deliver them, but they just hang out on the outside of muscle, even if you directly inject them. And if you think about how many muscles we have in our body, could you deliver them locally to every single muscle in your body? That might be hard. And then we forgot about the immune system that say, nope, I'm not going to have that. So they don't integrate, they don't migrate, and we couldn't do it, and it was a failure. At the same time that I thought this would be an easy fix, we, as a small group of parents, decided we would raise awareness around the world, and then everyone would give us tons of money. We'd have like $1 billion, and we would fix this disease, and it would be easy, right? I wanted a get-out-of-jail-free card. I wanted that monopoly get-out-of-jail-free because I really wanted to go back to the life I was hoping for. So we got into World War II vehicles, and we started off in New York City, at the seashore in New York City, and we crossed this country in the duck, the amphibious thing that goes into the water. No, they all liked the World War II vehicles. We didn't raise a single dime, and we failed on Myoblast, and so this was not a get-out-of-jail-free card. So welcome to the world of Duchenne. It was baptism by fire. It's not going to be quick, and it's not going to be easy, and the world is not going to stop and give you $1 billion. So then I began to think about a list of questions. And I had a lot of questions about who has this disease, what do they look like, is there a standard of care, where's the investment in this disease, who's investing in it, are any companies thinking about developing therapies? I had an awful lot of no's. In addition to the fact that in 1984 and through 1994, the people in research didn't like crazy parents. They thought that I was a desperate, crazy mom. I was, and am still. And so I couldn't get into major labs. I tried to get into Lou Kunkel's lab, and I said who I was, and he said no at the time. So I just couldn't get in. So I'll tell you what I did. So I pretended to be a postdoc. I generated my own CV. I was a postdoc. I had a lot of letters after my name. And I had also money to be funding my postdoctoral thesis. So I went into major labs offering to work for them. I went into a lot of them. I went into so many of them, about 30 of them. And then I think they were talking to each other because I got into the lab of this guy at the top. His name is Lee Sweeney. He was chair of physiology at the University of Pennsylvania. And he sat there and stared at me, and he said, so have you talked to this person? And I said, yeah, I think I had him in class when I was at that university. And he said, great, because he doesn't exist. So who are you really? And so I started to cry, and I said, here's the problem. Now my sons are in their teens, and I'm really worried, and I'd like to get this fixed as fast as possible. And he said, they're going to die. They are probably in heart failure, and you're probably going to lose them. So that's not going to work. So what is your plan B? And I said, I don't have a plan B. I was just hoping for that get-out-of-jail-free card, and we would solve this problem. And he said, it's not easy to solve this problem. I also had been in the lab of Eric Hoffman, who is the person at the bottom, and Eric Hoffman was in the lab of Lou Kunkel when the gene was cloned and the protein product identified. And they both thought I was crazy. So I said, okay, so let's get everyone together and let's have a meeting, because in Time magazine in 1994, the first genetics experiment occurred. And this was in the SCID, the severe combined immune deficiency disease, the bubble children who had to live in a bubble. And so Lee and Eric Hoffman said, we're not coming to a meeting with you, because after all, I mean, you've been lying across the country and across the world, and you made all this stuff up. And so why would we come to you? And I said, the people who did that experiment are coming to my meeting. And they were like, oh my God, one more time, Patricia. So they said, if French Anderson comes, and if Michael Blaze comes to the meeting, we'll come. So you know what I did, right? Got out of the meeting with these guys, flew to California to get one of them, and Michael Blaze was at NIH, begged them to come to a meeting, told them the whole story about how I was making things up, and asked them if they would come. And they said yes. So our first meeting was with Michael Blaze, and they talked about treating Duchenne muscular dystrophy with gene therapy. And that was in the year 1998. So we started. So I started, they said I was crazy, but maybe we could do something if we worked together. Teamwork is dream work. I met some other people along the way as well. At the time, the National Institutes of Health started an office in rare disease, and his name was Steve Groft, and Steve Groft led that office. It was a single person, Steve Groft, and no support for that office. The only thing Steve Groft could do was hold a meeting for a rare disease organization. Now, you might imagine there were a lot of people in the queue, and you also might imagine that I called him every single day and asked for the meeting. So in the year 2000, we had a meeting that was the first on the NIH campus talking about Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It was the first time it was mentioned at NIH. It felt like such a big deal. Just after that, I went over to the Hill and met some people because Steve Groff said it's important that you make some friends over there on campus of that Congress and that Senate, because they're going to need to be able to help you along the way. Teamwork, right? So I also then met Dave Zook, who's a policy expert, because I don't know about you, but when I went over there to meet some of those folks, I remembered my high school information about how the government works. I'm still not clear about how it works every single day, but I knew that other people did. So what policies are going to be important for us to know about? What policies are going to be important for us to participate in? And how do we make friends in Congress? And how do we make friends in NIH? And how do we make friends around the world so that we can work together to move this field forward? So then we all decided after our meetings that we would map out how to treat Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And you can see the inner circle is the really critical area. And then the other outside circle are ways that we might be able to modify the disease, slow it down just a little bit. But it's going to take all of it, probably a combination of medicines, to be able to treat Duchenne muscular dystrophy. It's hard, but we needed a map. So we also wanted to know who had this disease, what do they look like, are there differences in this disease and its progression, what's the natural history of this disease, and we also wanted standards of care. So what can we do right now today that would extend their lives? For instance, my sons died of heart failure. The heart is a muscle too. Can we protect it? Can we start at the beginning when they're babies and begin to protect that heart? Can we start when they're babies and protect that muscle? So we wanted to have standards of care. We got a group of people together. We, as parents, developed the standards of care. You might know that the physicians came on and said, no, let's do this in a rigorous way. So in 2010, our first standards of care were published. In 2018, they were updated, and we're now in the process of our third iteration in updating the standards of care, because now we do protect those hearts as soon as we can, beginning medicines at the age of 4 years old. So we are working very hard to protect those hearts. We start steroids very young, and now thinking about babies, because we are now, after doing a pilot, on December 16th of 25, we were added to the RUSP. So we're now doing newborn screening so that we can get these babies diagnosed at birth, put them in a safety net, and treat them. And hopefully we'll see a child who grows up and grows old and is able to still lift hands to mouth and maybe walk. So we also, in developing the map, what are the therapeutic strategies? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do this really well? So, and are there drugs that address these strategies that are already approved, and can we borrow them, and can we test them, and can we think about using them in Duchenne? While companies are developing gene therapies, gene editing, and all of that fancy, in my view, kind of Star Wars approaches to treating Duchenne. We started a registry. We wanted to know who has Duchenne. So we created this as a patient-reported registry. And I think this is so important because of the fact that as the FDA is working with companies to develop therapies, this is real-world data, how the patient feels and functions and survives. And these are important data elements so that we can provide this real-world evidence to the FDA. And I know Ron Bartek and his group have used this and gotten approvals. Because sometimes, I don't know about you, but we have these little boys, and we have this outcome measure called the North Star assessment, which is 17 measures of stand on one leg, stand on the other leg, sit on the floor and stand up, go up 4 steps, and so on. And I don't know about you, but little boys don't think that's so fun. And so sometimes they'll do 3 and go like, I'm done. So we wanted to have this real world evidence so we could show what this child does at home and the benefit he, or sometimes she, but very few times, is receiving from a given therapy, so that we could prove to FDA it's not just about a single outcome measure. It is about the totality of what we see in this child and the improvements that we see. So we have the registry. We now have 6,000 patients in this registry. We've had several reports. We know who's on cardiac meds, who's on steroids. We know what they look like during the day. We know what's important to them. We know what's important to these children and their caregivers so that we can demonstrate that to the FDA. So right now we're talking to FDA about heart, because I'm a little bit biased about heart function, and we're talking to them about looking at the left ventricular ejection fraction as a primary outcome measure, because we now can map that heart and understand what hearts are about to fail. So this is some legislation we were lucky enough to think about and to participate in teamwork. In 2000, after the meeting with Steve Groff, we in 2001 had a Senate hearing on Duchenne muscular dystrophy. That same day, on February 14, 2001, we in our group, Muscular Dystrophy Association, PPMD, a few other groups got together and wrote a piece of legislation called the Muscular Dystrophy Care Act. It had 3 principal factors in it: standards of care, centers of excellence in research, and a research plan. That was the piece of legislation that was introduced into the House and Senate in 2001. In 2001, you'll recall that we lost the towers in New York. At the time of 2001, every piece of legislation that was going through the House or the Senate was put on hold. We thought our hopes and our dreams were gone. But our champions in Congress didn't. So about December, they took this piece of legislation that was put on hold, and the people in the House went to 485 offices and said, please vote yes. Our friends, the late Senator Wellstone and Senator Specter, took this piece of legislation in the Senate to 100 offices and said, please, let's get something done before the end of the year. And so in December of 2001, this piece of legislation was signed into law. It was perhaps the single most important piece of legislation in our world, because as this got into place, it became the tipping point for industry to think about treating Duchenne muscular dystrophy. We had to reauthorize it, and we did in 2008. And in 2014, we reauthorized it again with our friends in Congress. And this was including a sundown clause, so it will never go away. So the NIH and the CDC and the Department of Defense are interested in this bill, and the committee, the MDCC, because everything in Washington has an acronym. The Muscular Dystrophy Coordinating Committee, that is responsible for the research plan, gets together with all federal partners once or twice a year and says, are we on track? Now, there's been some changes in NIH, but that doesn't mean we can stop what we do. We may not like them, we may get frustrated with them, but I will say, and you'll have to forgive this language because it's Joel Wood's fault. What we know about working with anyone is that, now forgive me for this one, the toe you step on today is the ass you're going to kiss tomorrow. So that's really important to know when you're dealing with school, when you're dealing with Congress, when you're dealing with anyone. Flowers, kindness, support always are better than something else. So we've had an impact on advocacy. We've spent $50 million. We've been able to leverage $900 million. We are now in a point of time where we have 8 approvals for Duchenne muscular dystrophy to include gene therapy. We have 2 more that are pending. We have 2 BLAs, or biologics license applications, before FDA. We will have a decision on one of them on August 22nd. So this is what we do. We are teamwork. We work with other foundations. We work with Ron Bartek because we love him and love that group of Vera, and we steal from him, P.S. We steal the registry, how they do it. We talk to them all the time about our data and their data. We work with other foundations because we're a team, and rare disease is bipartisan, and it's all of us because our children deserve everything we can do to keep them healthy. So this is us. We're here. We're in this whole thing together. Equal partners, good partners, helpful partners to move a field forward. See that? that little bit of stuff my team did for me because they know I can't do any slides. All right. So I did this. I love the game. I love games, and I play board games with my children, even though I know I'm way out of date, because I think games teach us to fail, and we all need to learn that, even our children. And I think games also help us understand. This is chutes and ladders or snakes and ladders or whatever you call it, because that's how this is, right? You're going to have some gains, and then you're going to fall down a chute, and you're going to think the world ends. And then you're going to find out that you're going to get up off your knees and pick it up again and make the world begin again. So chutes and ladders is my favorite game because it teaches me not to give up. And if I go to my knees, which we've all done many times, I just stand back up and go forward. So every single child deserves our help. Rare disease is bipartisan. It's all of us together. And I'm just going to finish because I know that I have only 5 more minutes. I am, first of all, when I have a bad day, and don't let the bad days win, I go to poetry. And I like the old poets, the Whitmans and so on, but I also know the funky new poet, or recently discovered poet on my part. His name is Harry Baker, and he's from the UK, and he's a weird guy, and I love him. And this is what he wrote in a poem he calls Wonderful, and it's just an excerpt of that. So, and of all the words you'll ever hear, remember these. Life is too short to eat celery. Life is too long to have jealousy. Life is likely just the right length for all of us to need a therapist. May you be seriously silly. May you be wickedly kind. May you be brilliantly dumb sometimes and stupidly smart. May you certainly have doubts. May your weirdness be your norm. May the coolest thing about you be your warmth. May you powerfully be vulnerable, or at least mightily soft. May you be a contradiction and yet at the same time not. And whether you are any or none or all of those things, may you know that you're loved and your children deserve you. Thank you.